Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when even raindrops had a pecking order. It's Edo-era Japan, and you're trudging through the narrow, winding alleys of a bustling city that smells faintly of charcoal smoke, pickled radish, and wet earth. The clouds are heavy. Your feet, wrapped in straw sandals, are already soaked. You unfurl your paper and bamboo umbrella, but wait. Did you just commit a civic offense? Because in Edo, even sheltering yourself from the rain required knowing very specific rules. Not the don't poke someone in the eye kind of rules, though that too. But we're talking regulations so meticulous you probably won't survive this walk without a fine, a scolding, or at least an aggressive side-eye from a passing monk. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1793. You in the heart of Edo, today's Tokyo, and the city is breathing under a blanket of light drizzle. The shogunate is strong, the merchant class is thriving, and someone is yelling at you from across the street. No, not about your walking speed. About your umbrella? It's tilted too far to the right, and you're hogging sidewalk space. That's right. In this perfectly choreographed urban ballet, your umbrella behavior matters. You see, umbrellas Vagasa weren't just a rainy day afterthought. They were extensions of social order, mobile markers of etiquette, and in many ways, tiny, waterproof metaphors for everything Tokugawa Japan stood for: hierarchy, harmony, and the relentless regulation of everyday life. At first glance, the rules seem charming. Hold your umbrella at a 30-degree angle. Close it before stepping beneath awnings. Never drip on someone more important than you. But there's bite beneath the quaint. Edo's umbrella ordinances were enforced with both social pressure and citywide mandates. Officials published guidelines, and town criers shouted them in market squares, reminding people to mind their umbrella manners. And if you think this sounds excessive, wait until you learn about the umbrella patrols. These weren't just nosy neighbors, they were minor bureaucrats assigned to enforce public decorum. Imagine a guy in a straw raincoat watching you from across the tea shop, notebook in hand, ready to document your tilt infraction. It's like the fashion police met a municipal zoning board. Your Vagasa, by the way, is handmade oiled washi paper, stretched across slender bamboo ribs, painted in earthy indigo or a soft crimson hue if you're feeling bold. Depending on your social class, your umbrella might have a simple black design or sport the crest of your clan. But don't get too flashy unless you're high up the ladder. Merchants often pushed the line with ornate designs, prompting constant grumbles from samurai purists who thought umbrella designs were getting too loud for commoners. Historians still argue whether the umbrella rules were originally codified for safety tight. Alleys and sharp umbrella spokes do not mix, or as a way to reinforce status distinctions. Most agree it was probably both. Edo was a fire-prone wooden metropolis, packed with over 1 million people. Any object large enough to poke, soak, or distract was understandably a matter of citywide concern. And here's your quirky tidbit. Umbrellas had curfews. Well, not official ones, but if you were still walking around with an open Vagasa after a drizzle had passed, expect people to look at you like you just walked into a bathhouse in full armor. Some towns even had bell signals to mark when umbrellas should be closed for the day. Rain etiquette was a live performance, and everyone had to hit their mark. Now picture yourself dodging puddles, carefully maneuvering your Vagasa to avoid brushing the merchant lady beside you. She has her own umbrella, bright red, delicately lacquered, and she's using it like a personal shield. Your eyes meet for a second, and you both adjust your angles just a hair, a silent agreement to not cause a scene. That's Edo sidewalk diplomacy. But what happens if your umbrella breaks mid-rain? The spokes snap, and suddenly it's a sad, saggy mess, flapping like a deflated jellyfish. You can't just toss it. No, there are umbrella disposal regulations too. Broken vagasa were considered litter, and dropping one in the street was an offense. Instead, you carry it respectfully under one arm, defeated but still compliant, until you reach a disposal site, often near bathhouses or temples where craftsmen gathered the materials for reuse. By the way, that's another layer: umbrella repair shops. These cozy makeshift stalls popped up during rainy seasons, offering quick fixes and polite lectures. Too much tilt, the old man tells you, examining your frayed ribs. You treat this like a Western umbrella? That's your problem. You nod, grateful, but make a mental note to stop walking with so much swagger. Rainy season in Edo lasted from late spring to early summer, and during those humid weeks, umbrellas practically became a fifth limb. City officials would revise public bulletins to account for umbrella traffic, reminding people not to block bridges, to avoid clustering near entrances, and to keep umbrella tips down when crossing at intersections. There were even training scrolls issued for young samurai who had to learn how to sheath their swords and manage an umbrella with grace. That's coordination. And yes, if you were wondering, samurai umbrellas had extra flair. Reinforced ribs, family crests, and occasionally extra compartments. But we'll get to that shady business in another section. For now, you pause at a street corner where foot traffic thickens like miso soup. It's hard to move without jostling someone's canopy, so you do what any Edoite: you fold your umbrella, tilt your head, and make yourself small. The passing merchant grunts approval. An old lady nods. You've done it, you've passed the unspoken umbrella test. But even as you walk on, the system watches. You're one rain-drenched variable in a society obsessed with balance, order, and visibility. Your umbrella is a dance partner, a class signal, and a public hazard all at once. And this is just the beginning. Umbrellas in Edo weren't just tools. They were part of the city's nervous system. Oh, and remember, don't even think about shaking off the rainwater in a crowded alley. Unless, of course, you enjoy being shamed by a rice cake vendor and his grandmother. You keep walking. The rain tapers off, but Edo doesn't. The city pulses with muddy sandals, squawking vendors, clanging bells, and the damp rustle of paper umbrellas folding like obedient origami. You pass under the edge of a long tiled roof, carefully, respectfully, because this is no place for personal shade. The covered walkway belongs to the domain of the Merchant Association. And you? You're a guest on this stretch of stone. Sidewalks in Edo aren't just a place to walk. They read a complex social script disguised as mud and gravel. The shogun's capital may be famous for its rigid class divisions and flamboyant courtesies, but nowhere does that structure play out more vividly than on the city's narrow walkways. And you'd better learn fast, because stepping on the wrong side of the street here could get you everything from a lecture to a literal shove. The width of Edo's main roads varies wildly. Some avenues stretch wide enough for ox-drawn carts to trundle through, while most alleyways feel like they were designed by a guy with a tape measure and a grudge against elbows. On either side of the roads, slightly raised banks or tamped-down footpaths form what you'd call sidewalks, though these were more philosophy than infrastructure. See, pedestrian space was socially zoned. The right-of-way belonged to the upper class. Period. Samurai, government officials, and high-ranking priests strolled the honorable side of the path. usually the side with better drainage and fewer chicken droppings. Everyone else had to work around that. If you're a merchant artisan or just some poor sap caught in the rain with a dripping umbrella and low social standing, you instinctively veer left, hunching a little, your eyes lowered, just enough to acknowledge superiority, but not so much you trip over a fish basket. Historians still argue whether these sidewalk protocols were official edicts or deeply embedded social habits, probably both, reinforced over generations and enforced by everyone from temple guards to nosy grandmothers. And yes, there were known violation hotspots where pedestrians routinely broke rank, usually near bridges or festival sites, which often turned into etiquette anarchy once the sake started flowing. Now here's where it gets even weirder. There were certain street corners where you had to yield to invisible traffic. That's right, empty stretches of road were sometimes considered reserved zones for daimyo processions. If you were caught walking casually on one of these after the shogun's carriage passed, even an hour later, you de-earn yourself a dressing down for disrespect. One guy in 1812 reportedly spent the night in a holding cell for chewing dried squid on such a path. Imagine explaining that one to your wife. Your umbrella doesn't make things easier. While it protects you from the drizzle still lingering on temple roofs, it also widens your presence. And in Edo, being too wide is a crime of arrogance. You try to adjust, tilting your vagasa ever so slightly away from a passing monk, but now you reach dangerously close to dripping on a sake vendor's bamboo mat display. He glares, you nod an apology and shuffle on. Foot traffic flows in patterns that feel organic, but are strictly enforced by centuries of repetition. There's an almost musical rhythm to it. Step, yield, nod, sidestep, pass. The higher the rank of the passerby, the deeper the ba, or in rainy season, the more exaggerated the umbrella dip. You practice yours when no one's looking. Not out of fear, necessarily, but because the embarrassment of getting it wrong is worse than a scolding. Oh, and if you're traveling in a group, get ready for umbrella choreography. The front person calls gentle commands. Left, tilt, incoming noble. Tighten formation near the apothecary. Watch the puddle near the tofu shop. You become part of a silent, sloshing machine. Coordination like this makes modern sidewalk texting seem positively Neolithic. The most dangerous spots are the corners where alleys meet main roads. Here, visibility drops, and umbrella collisions spike. During the rainy season, minor injuries from umbrella spokes were common enough that some city doctors offered Vagasa eye jab treatments for a small fee. One barber even advertised a drip balm for umbrella-related ear infections. A fringe practice emerged among the more competitive citizens, especially among lower-tier samurai and middle-class merchants. They'd outfit their umbrellas with carved wooden end caps shaped like angry animal heads, tigers, wolves, even frogs. The idea was simple. Intimidate your fellow walkers into making space. It worked about as well as wearing sunglasses indoors today. You looked ridiculous, but people did move. Now, let's talk mud. Edo sidewalks were often slick, especially near open sewer canals or market stalls. Slipping wasn't just inconvenient, it was humiliating. Fall in front of a samurai, and you risked being mistaken for drunk, disorderly, or worse, undignified. Fall with your umbrella extended, and you might impale a tofu vendor or append a stack of medicine jars. So seasoned Edo walkers developed a squat step, knees slightly bent, foot angled sideways, umbrella low and centered. Quirky detail for tonight. Some neighborhoods train children in walk school. Not officially, of course, but elders would host informal afternoon sessions where kids were taught when to bow, how to hold an umbrella during processions, and why you never ever walk in front of a pregnant woman in a white kimono. That's just tempting fate. You pass a row of lantern-lit food stalls now. The rain has slowed, and with it, your pace. You tuck your umbrella slightly more upright. It's still open, but angled like you know what you're doing. A noodle seller whistles in appreciation. Confidence is half the etiquette battle. By now, your feet are aching, and your mental energy is fully occupied by sidewalk math. How close am I to that aristocrat? What's the drip radius of my umbrella? Did I just splash that monk's prayer beads? And then it happens your umbrella brushes someone else's. Not just anyone. A middle-aged woman in an elaborate kimono, flanked by a young attendant and an umbrella carrier. Yes, she's got a designated umbrella person. You freeze. Her attendant raises an eyebrow. The umbrella bearer frowns. You mumble an apology and lower your vagasa in a deep arc. The woman glides past as if nothing happened, though her umbrella angles a fraction sharper than necessary, and you feel its edge skim your sleeve like a reminder. Stay in your lane. This is Edo. The sidewalk isn't just where you walk. It's where you prove you know how to live. So you survive the sidewalks for now, but your umbrella? It's starting to feel like more than just a canopy. It's a conversation piece, a social cue, maybe even a trap. Because in Edo, owning a vagasa is one thing, owning the right kind of vagasa, that's a whole different story. The umbrella you're carrying isn't just made of paper and bamboo. It's a symbol, a mood, a bureaucratic tightrope. Depending on its size, color, design, and condition, your umbrella tells the entire street exactly who you are, and sometimes who you want them to think you are. Back then, vagasa came in all sorts of flavors. The Shinongasa, snake as eye umbrella, has a hypnotic ringed pattern and is popular with geisha and entertainers. The Bangasa, a thicker, sturdier version with dark lacquered ribs, is the go-to for laborers and folks who don't have time for delicate flair. The noted Tagasa, meanwhile, is comically huge great for outdoor tea ceremonies. Less great when you're trying to pass someone in a tofu market. Your umbrella, modest but carefully chosen, walks a fine line, not too plain, lest you look sloppy, not too ornate, or you might get accused of putting on airs. Because make no mistake, umbrella envy is real, and the city's unspoken dress codes stretch all the way up the bamboo shaft and across the lacquered canopy. Here's where things get spicy. Samurai believed certain umbrella designs should be reserved for their class alone, specifically those featuring their family crests, man, or those with imported dyes like ultramarine or that deep, forbidden purple. When merchants started getting rich and customizing their vagasa with bold colors and faux crests, things got tense. You might think of it like someone today driving a knockoff luxury car with a fake diplomatic plate, technically legal, deeply annoying to the elite. One record from the 1830s tells of a silk dealer who was hauled into magistrate court for umbrella impersonation. He used a floral crest suspiciously close to the Matsuda clan as emblem. The verdict? He was fined, his umbrella was confiscated, and salt in the wound, he was forced to walk home in the rain under a plain brown substitute. Historians still argue whether these cases were driven by genuine security concerns, fearing disguised threats to the samurai, or just the usual aristocratic ego flare-ups. Either way, umbrella surveillance was no joke. Fabric guilds kept records of which umbrellas were being produced, by whom, and for which clientele. Certain designs required pre-approval from the local magistrate's office. So yes, your paper umbrella had paperwork, but it wasn't just what your umbrella looked like. It was also how you used it. If you let the tip dip too low while passing a high-ranking official, you risked being seen as aggressive or disrespectful. If you held it too high, you might appear clueless or worse, foreign-leaning. And if you dared spin it, absolutely not. Only children and fools twirled umbrellas. Quirky umbrella crime of the night. There was an infamous Edo prankster known only as Vagasa Saburo. He'd sneak up behind unsuspecting pedestrians during heavy rain and swap their umbrellas with shoddier versions. Same color, same size, different quality. It took people hours to notice. Some called him a nuisance, others a performance artist. He was never caught, though the trail of downgraded umbrellas led all the way to the Yoshiwara Pleasure District. Of course it did. You stop now at a tea house awning and lower your umbrella with the solemn precision of a kabuki actor. Behind you, two men are deep in debate over their Vagasa frames. One argues that red lacquered ribs signal too much vanity. The other insists that black lacquer lacks poetic spirit. You sip your tea and realize they're not just talking about umbrellas. They're talking about identity, taste, and Edo's favorite pastime, judging each other politely. Another layer to all this: seasonal umbrellas. That's right, just like you might change your wardrobe for winter or summer, Vagasa had seasonal variants. In high summer, thinner paper with wider ribs allowed airflow and prevented mold. In the colder months, tightly wrapped designs and darker tones prevailed. The rainy season, oh, that called for oiled papers so thick you could practically hear it thunk open like a door in an old shrine. You pass a craftsman's stall on your way home, and he's laying out the ribs for a new batch of umbrellas. His fingers move like spiders, quiet, deliberate, precise. Each rib is shaved bamboo, each sheet of washi paper handmade. He applies oil, layer by layer, muttering something about how people today don't respect the art. You nod in solidarity, even though you don't fully understand the differences in lacquer grades. It's the thought that counts. Interestingly, women's umbrellas had their own code. A Vagasa in soft pink or vermilion signaled youth and marriageability, while indigo or moss green suggested modesty, maturity, or widowhood. Combine that with kimono color, hairstyle, and walking speed, and suddenly your umbrella becomes a dating profile that can't lie. And speaking of dating, sharing an umbrella with someone in Edo wasn't just convenient. It was borderline scandalous. We'll get deeper into that in the next section. But for now, just know, if you're seen walking with someone under the same Vagasa, eyebrows will be raised, gossip will flow, a poem may be written, and there's a non-zero chance your parents will be summoned. Umbrellas also made occasional guest appearances in poetry and song. The act of opening one was likened to revealing secrets. Closing one, a metaphor for retreat. One anonymous poem went: "She opened her umbrella, and the world closed around us, just rain, her perfume, and silence." Who knew public infrastructure could be so emotionally loaded? As the evening sets in, you glance at your umbrella. It's drying now, half open on a bamboo stand, its paper glistening faintly with residual rain. Tomorrow you'll oil it again. You'll check for tears. You'll ask yourself if you really need a new one, maybe with the plum blossom pattern you saw last week. And you'll hesitate, because in Edo, changing your umbrella isn't just a purchase. It's a public announcement. So walk carefully. Tilt gracefully. Choose wisely, because what shelters you also defines you, and in a city like this, your umbrella says everything before you ever speak a word. You're back on the street again. Rain's still falling, a fine mist now, the kind that sneaks under your collar and makes everything feel slightly sticky. You're gripping your Vagasa with one hand, the other clutched at your sleeve to keep it from dragging in the puddles. Up ahead, The sidewalk narrows, and walking toward you is a samurai. Alone, composed, and not swerving an inch. You feel it in your gut. You're the one who has to move. Because in Edo, sidewalk space isn't shared, it's ranked. And samurai? They walk like they own the mud under your feet. Spoiler alert, they kind of do. Social hierarchy in the Edo period wasn't just written into law, it was walked into daily life. Who goes left, who goes right, who tilts their umbrella more, who pauses to let the other pass. All of that depends on your status. And when it comes to the samurai class, they got the lion's share of courtesy, umbrella room, and overall street dominance. Right-of-way on sidewalks followed a silent but widely understood code. If a samurai is coming, you step aside. No matter how inconvenient, no matter how big your umbrella, no matter if you were there first. If you don't, best case scenario, you're scolded. Worst case, you get a sharp wooden umbrella jab. Or if you really disrespect the order, your day takes a sudden turn toward a magistrate's office and a lot of bowing. One of the most iconic elements, the umbrella bow. You lower your vagasa, not just your head, when passing a samurai. Not so much that you soak yourself, but just enough to physically acknowledge their superiority. Umbrellas become like movable stage props in this very public performance of deference. Get it right, and you might receive a slight nod. Get it wrong, you'll be muttered about until sunset. Now, imagine the sidewalks during peak procession season. Daimyo lords parading to and from the capital in elaborate retinues. Whole roads cleared. Citizens ordered to kneel and lower umbrellas completely or keep them folded entirely, lest they appear to shield themselves from the gaze of authority. After all, what kind of peasant would dare protect themselves from a divine drizzle falling on a noble? Historians still argue whether the street right-of-way rules were more rigorously enforced in the city center or in rural districts. Some say it was stricter near castles. Others believe smaller towns were more obsessed with performative loyalty. But across the board, the principle was the same. Rank walked first. Here is your quirky historical nugget. There was a brief Edo trend among lower-ranking samurai of intentionally brushing umbrella tips with passing merchants. It was a kind of dominance game. Nothing direct, just a gentle nudge, a quiet message that said, I walk straighter than you, and I expect you to move. This sort of petty umbrella jousting was tolerated as long as it didn't escalate. But occasionally, it did. In one case from 1849, a merchant's son reportedly refused to step aside and deliberately let his umbrella drip on a passing minor samurai. The samurai stopped, stared, then used his own vagasa to thwack the merchant's out of his hand. A small crowd gathered. The merchant boy bowed, but then muttered something sarcastic. Perhaps your umbrella was thirsty, too. Things went downhill from there. No deaths, thankfully, but multiple umbrellas were lost in the scuffle. A lesson was learned, probably. Interestingly, samurai didn't always carry their own umbrellas. If you were high enough up the ladder, you had an umbrella bearer, a young attendant who walked beside or slightly behind you, holding a massive no-de-tagasa overhead. These bearers had to master a strange kind of umbrella martial art, protecting the lord from sun and rain without obstructing his view or impeding his stride. One wrong move, and your career path went from trusted retainer to T-server- in the kitchen. And what about sword etiquette under umbrellas? Yes, that's a thing. The samurai's katana is worn on the left hip, unsheathed from the left side. But with an umbrella in hand, especially during a sudden downpour, drawing the sword gets tricky. Samurai practiced how to draw one-handed or even push the umbrella upward with their shoulder while keeping the right hand free. Edo was a city that expected you to handle your accessories with flair and threat readiness. There were even rumors, probably exaggerated, that some high-ranking officials used custom bagasa reinforced with metal ribs, strong enough to deflect a knife or even conceal a short blade. Think of it as the Edo-era equivalent of an umbrella with tactical mode. Whether this was true or just kabuki-inspired urban legend, well, historians still argue whether Vagasa-based weapons ever saw real use outside the theater or pulp fiction. You pass a patrol officer, now he's not a samurai, but he carries a short sword and the kind of slow stare that makes you check your umbrella's alignment. You straighten it slightly. It's fine. You've learned. The street may be wet, but your etiquette is dry and precise. There's a strange intimacy to this kind of social choreography. You start to read people by the way they walk under rain, the way a samurai lets his umbrella tilt just far enough not to touch yours, but never more, the way commoners quicken their pace when passing officials, the way umbrellas fold like wings when entering a shop or shrine. One unexpected layer to all this: age and gender sometimes overruled rank. Elderly women, particularly those with white hair and elegant kimono, were granted surprising levels of deference. Even junior samurai stepped aside for them, Vagasa lowered slightly. Was it reverence, fear, a cultural blend of both? Maybe these grannies just carried themselves like queens, and nobody wanted to test them. There were moments of rebellion, too. Young apprentices who walked deliberately slow under wide umbrellas to accidentally block samurai traffic. Actors and poets who used outrageous umbrella designs. One guy painted his with a scene of a fish slapping a noble. He was banned from 2 tea houses and briefly famous. Street performance as protest, but most of the time you fall into the rhythm. Your umbrella becomes a part of your body, held low when a lord approaches, high when passing a child, folded neatly when entering someone's gate. You don't even have to think about it anymore. The rules seep into your bones. And still the rain keeps falling. Edo's sidewalks aren't washed clean. They're washed into order. You're up before sunrise. The rain hasn't stopped, only changed tempo from whisper to patter, like a koto string struck softly, but repeatedly. You squint through the gray light, umbrella slung under one arm as you make your way toward the Arakata district. You've got business there, not shopping, not errands. Today you're going to peek behind the curtain of Edo's umbrella world. Because if you thought Vagasa just appeared in neat rows on market stands, think again. Edo's umbrella scene was a well-oiled, highly regulated machine. Welcome to the realm of umbrella guilds. Guilds called Zia in Japanese governed everything from sword polishers to tofu sellers. And umbrellas? Oh yes, they had their own. The Kasase controlled who could make them, who could sell them, and who could learn how not to glue their fingers together trying. The shop you're heading toward smells of wood shavings and sesame oil. You push aside a split bamboo curtain, and there it is, a small workshop dimly lit, the floor strewn with curled shreds of lacquered paper and strips of bamboo. 3 apprentices sit cross-legged, working in near silence. One sands a rib, another pastes washi onto a canopy, and the third just well stares at a glue pot like it's about to explode. Everyone starts somewhere. Guild membership wasn't optional. If you wanted to make or sell umbrellas in Edo, you needed the blessing and the badge of the Kasaza. And let's be clear, this wasn't just some dusty club with ceremonial handshakes. It was a deeply embedded bureaucracy with inspections, dues, oaths of loyalty, and secrets that definitely weren't to be shared with anyone outside the trade. Historically, the Umbrella Guild operated under the protection of the local magistrate's office. which granted it semi-autonomous power to set prices, control quality, and limit who got to enter the business. Historians still argue whether this kind of protectionism helped artisans or simply kept innovation in check. But one thing is certain: without guild control, Edo's Vagasa industry would have looked a lot messier. Like dripping red ink in the rain, kind of messy. Take pricing, for example. Guilds had strict codes to prevent price undercutting. You couldn't just roll into town and start selling umbrellas for a few mon less than your neighbor. If you tried, expect a visit from a very polite but very firm representative who would explain the error of your entrepreneurial ways over tea, while slowly folding one of your ribs in half. And the training? Oh, it was brutal in the charming, old craftsman kind of way. Young apprentices would start at age 12 or 13, often the sons of umbrella makers, though sometimes orphans taken in by the trade. For the first year, they wouldn't even touch an umbrella. Just prep materials, sweep floors, and study technique from a respectful distance. You know, like boot camp, but with more splinters. Your quirky moment of the night? There was a superstition among umbrella craftsmen that if you sneezed while folding the canopy, it would rain the next day. If you sneezed twice, someone in your household would break their umbrella within the week. Triple sneezes? That meant you'd misalign a rib and shame your ancestors. And yes, the guild tracked these things. You'd better believe someone had a sneeze log. Guild leaders' oyakata, or masters, held the keys to the real secrets. The oil mixtures that made paper waterproof but still flexible. The dye formulas that didn't bleed the precise angle needed to keep a Vagasa open smoothly but not snap shut in strong wind. These techniques were passed down orally, apprentice to master, often on rainy nights over weak sake and gossip about rival workshops. You overhear one master today muttering about a competing shop that allegedly started using imported bamboo. Scandalous. The grain's too slick, he says. No soul in it. You nod as if you understand bamboo soul theory. It's safer that way. Guilds also controlled distribution. Umbrellas were delivered to shops on strict routes mapped out like mini supply chains. Each district had umbrella days when new stock arrived. You could tell because vendors would hang a small piece of red paper under the eaves. New Vagasa in stock. No fighting in line. And yes, there were umbrella salesmen called kasauri who walked from neighborhood to neighborhood like the world's soggiest door-to-door philosophers. They wore wide straw hats, sandals with paper stuffing, and carried samples strapped to their backs. Their chants echoed through the alleys. New Vagasa, smooth lacquer, whisper quiet in the wind. Sometimes they threw in a haiku if the mood struck. These vendors often partnered with the guilds, but sometimes not always they tried to skirt the rules, smuggling in cheaper umbrellas from Osaka, for instance, or selling late at night without a permit. The guild had informants, of course, and when caught, rogue sellers were publicly shamed, forced to sit in the rain holding their defective goods as the public walked past, umbrellas held high and dry. A soggy justice. Historians still argue whether the kasaza stifled competition or preserved craftsmanship, but many agree the Vagasa of Edo were some of the finest ever made, balanced, elegant, functional, and deeply personal. No two were exactly alike, and even after 1,000 uses, you'd know yours by the tiny knot where an apprentice once fumbled the string. Now here's something few know. Umbrella guilds occasionally collaborated with other artisans, dye makers, paper makers, even kabuki costume tailors. There were inter-guild festivals where craftsmen showed off innovations. One year, someone unveiled a fold-in-4 Vagasa more compact, easier to store. It was beautiful. Also completely impractical. It collapsed in the rain and soaked half the audience. Never seen again. You leave the shop just as the light shifts. Rain's still falling, but you feel different. Like you're in on a secret now. You know what went into that bamboo frame in your hand, the layers of paste and dye, the hours of sanding and oiling, the whispered curses when a rib snapped at the wrong angle. This isn't just an umbrella anymore. It's a badge of an entire hidden society. A small, rain-soaked empire held together by thread, paper, glue, and pride. And tomorrow, you'll carry it differently. The next day, the clouds have had a change of heart. The sky is mostly clear, the streets still glistening, and the puddles are steaming under the warming sun. You step outside with your umbrella not because you need it, but because you might. And because, well, you're meeting someone. This is no ordinary stroll. This is a slow, very public, and highly regulated saunter through the minefield that is Edo-era romance. That's right. It's time to talk about umbrella etiquette for lovers, loners, and those awkward souls somewhere in between. You've probably seen the classic image before. Two people walking close together, a single vagasa shielding them both from the rain. Cozy, romantic, intimate in a way that leaves no room for misunderstanding, and in Edo, practically a scandal in broad daylight. Let's get one thing straight. Sharing an umbrella was more than just a kind gesture. It was a social statement. It told everyone watching, yes, we are together. Yes, we've probably made eye contact and exchanged poems. And yes, someone's mother is absolutely going to hear about this. Young lovers had to be careful, especially women. A girl spotted under the same umbrella as a man who wasn't her husband or officially betrothed. That meant whispers in the tea shop, maybe a subtle warning from the neighbors, and in extreme cases, a letter sent directly to her parents, with no emojis. Historians still argue whether umbrella sharing was considered an outright declaration of engagement, or just a culturally flammable moment of flirtation. But what's certain is that it meant something, especially if the umbrella was tilted to keep the rain off her, while he let the drip hit his shoulder. That wasn't just chivalry. That was practically a haiku in motion. There were even etiquette guides, tiny woodblock printed booklets teaching men the proper way to share an umbrella. Keep the vagasa centered. Match your pace. Tilt slightly when turning corners. And for the love of everything holy, don't let her kimono get wet. That's relationship-ending behavior. Quirky detail? In the pleasure quarters, umbrella sharing was staged. Literally, courtesans would sometimes allow their clients to hold the umbrella accidentally too close, a calculated move meant to imply intimacy in front of jealous onlookers. It was all theater, of course, but oh, how the crowd loved it, and oh, how many men fell for it. You see a young couple now just ahead of you. She's got a soft green umbrella with a pattern of plum blossoms, and he's pretending not to be thrilled about the fact that they re-walking under it together. Every few steps, he adjusts his stride to match hers. She glances up and smiles. It's subtle. It's sweet. It's also a bold social risk if anyone from her family happens to be walking by. But umbrella etiquette didn't only apply to lovers. Loners had their own rules. Walking alone with an oversized vagasa? You might be seen as trying too hard, maybe compensating for a lack of company. Too small an umbrella? Clearly unprepared. And heaven help you if your umbrella was crooked or clattered in the wind. That's the Edo equivalent of walking around with toilet paper on your sandal. Then there were the widows and the wives of traveling merchants, who often walked alone for months at a time. For them, umbrella posture was almost ritualistic. A lowered canopy signaled mourning. A modestly tilted, earth-toned vagasa showed humility and virtue. If they walked too boldly, too brightly colored, let's just say the gossip flowed faster than the Sumida River during snowmelt. And yes, people watched. The street wasn't just a path, it was a stage. The way you held your umbrella said everything about your mood, your morals, your marital status. A slightly more upright tilt might suggest confidence. A drooping tip could mean heartbreak. People read umbrellas like palm lines. You pass a group of older women gathered outside a rice shop. They're whispering behind their sleeves, watching another young couple walk by under a shared canopy. One of them skusks softly. Another smirks. You catch the words umbrella today, wedding next spring. It's meant to be funny, but you can tell it carries weight. Then there's the matter of umbrella borrowing. You'd think this would be simple. Someone forgets theirs, you offer yours, the day is saved. But no, this was fraught with meaning. Lending your umbrella to someone, especially someone of the opposite sex, was a culturally loaded gesture. The implication? I am willing to let you carry a piece of my personal space through the rain. That's deeper than any love letter. You overhear a shopkeeper teasing a clerk who lent her umbrella to a carpenter. So when's the wedding? He calls. She throws a pickle at him. Everyone laughs. The carpenter blushes and buys 2 pickled plums he doesn't need. And speaking of social blunders, here's your fringe tidbit. There was once an umbrella duel over a romantic misunderstanding. 2 young men, both convinced they shared an umbrella with the same girl, met at dawn near a bridge and proceeded to try and knock each other as umbrellas into the river. The girl showed up halfway through and threw both of theirs in instead. Edo women did not have time for that nonsense. Even the act of closing your umbrella could be symbolic. If a couple walked under one together, and then one of them closed it, too early leaving the other exposed, it was like a micro breakup, a rainy season form of ghosting. The Edo version of read receipt, scene. But let's not forget that umbrellas also offered solace to the lonely. Walking alone, your Vigasa could become a shield against the world. You could hide tears under it, talk to yourself in private, or listen to the gentle percussion of rain on washi paper, and imagine you were somewhere else entirely, a personal bubble in a very crowded city. One poet once wrote, "Beneath the Vigasa, no one knows I cry." That's the thing about umbrellas, they were as much emotional armor as they were weather protection. You keep walking past another pair, ducking together under a deep indigo canopy. They're laughing quietly, nervously. Maybe it's their first time sharing one, maybe not. But it's clear they've rehearsed this moment 100 times in their heads. Now, finally, it's real. And for a few steps, at least, it's just the 2 of them and the gentle, patient rain. So whether you're walking alone or in step with someone else, remember, the Vigasa is never just about the weather. It's about where you are, who you're with, and how much of yourself you're willing to let someone else stand under. The rain has returned, not a drizzle this time, but a steady, curtain-like fall that turns rooftops into waterfalls and alleyways into shallow creeks. You open your umbrella instinctively, listening to the satisfying shuff as the oiled paper expands. It smells faintly of cedar, ink, and something else danger. Because tonight your Vigasa is not just protection. It's a potential suspect. Welcome to the shadowy side of Edo's umbrella culture, where rain covers more than just heads, and a Vigasa might be hiding something with an edge. You turn down a quieter street. It's mostly residential, with the faint yellow flicker of lanterns glowing behind shoshi screens. There's a tension in the air, and it's not just the storm. Here, umbrellas weren't always just umbrellas. Sometimes they were cover literally for smuggling, eavesdropping, or, well, Let us just say certain umbrella ribs were reinforced for reasons that had nothing to do with structural integrity. Let's rewind a bit. Edo was a sprawling city over 1 million people, dense, hierarchical, and constantly monitored. But it was also riddled with blind spots, narrow alleys, thick fog, torrential rain that made it hard to see who was approaching. And into this moody backdrop came the Vagasa, large enough to hide a face, quiet enough to mask footsteps, and if modified, capable of holding something much sharper than polite society would allow. Now, officially, carrying concealed weapons was banned in Edo for everyone below the samurai class. Merchants, artisans, even wandering monks, none of them were supposed to bear blades. But that didn't stop anyone creative enough to look at a long, hollow bamboo umbrella shaft and think, you know what else could fit in here? Historians still argue whether these umbrella swords were widespread or more myth than menace. But court records do contain the occasional case of concealed weapons found during raids, sometimes in walking sticks, sometimes in fans, and sometimes in umbrellas. One story from 1827 involves a former bodyguard-turned-bamboo merchant who hollowed out Vagasa handles and slid short daggers inside. He sold them to nervous shopkeepers in rougher districts. The cover story? Weighted handles for better wind resistance. Not subtle, but apparently effective until someone got poked too hard during a price dispute. And this wasn't limited to violence. Smugglers loved umbrellas. A few clever types used the hollow spaces between ribs to transport contraband, powdered medicines, forbidden scrolls, or the occasional imported trinket from Dutch traders down in Nagasaki. A single umbrella could carry more than a satchel, and if stopped by a city patrol, all you had to do was shrug, bow politely, and explain you were just protecting your delicate rice paper novel from the weather. But the authorities caught on. Patrolmen began adding umbrella checks to their routines. During especially rainy festivals, when crowds were dense and visibility was low, officials stationed at bridge entries would randomly inspect Vagasa. Not thoroughly, of course. It was hard to do more than glance without dismantling the thing, and most patrolmen weren't interested in paper cuts and lacquer splinters. Still, the message was clear. Vagasa weren't invisible anymore. One of the most famous umbrella-related crimes in Edo history. A kabuki actor known for playing tragic Ronin was found murdered outside a tea house in 1842. No one saw the killer. No weapon was found. But near the scene lay a single umbrella, snapped in half, with one rib missing. Conspiracy theories bloomed. Some claimed the rib was sharpened into a blade. Others believed the attacker used the umbrella as a distraction, poking the actor's shoulder before striking from behind. No one was ever arrested. The incident became known as the umbrella at dawn, and some say actors still avoid walking alone during early rainstorms because of it. Your quirky detail of the evening? There was an Edo-era street performer who used modified umbrellas in his act, twirling them, balancing them on his nose, even juggling them like spinning plates. What most didn't know, one of those umbrellas had a secret compartment filled with coins he de-skimmed from donations at nearby shrines. He only got caught when he dropped the wrong umbrella into a koi pond, and the fish started fighting over coins. And don't think only the criminals were clever. Some umbrella craftsmen were asked, discreetly, of course, to design Vagasa with specific enhancements. Hidden compartments, detachable ribs, even one infamous design that folded with a flick and emitted a distracting squeal when released. Was it to startle enemies? Scare dogs? No one knows. The craftsman disappeared after a visit from the magistrate's office, and his shop quietly rebranded as a comb store. There's a deep irony in all this. The same object that marked etiquette and elegance was also a tool of subversion. The Vagasa's symbolism split. In daylight, it signaled manners and order. By night, it whispered rebellion. That duality made the umbrella the perfect metaphor for Edo itself, outwardly rigid, inwardly full of secrets. As you pass through the rain-soaked back streets, you spot a young man hurrying ahead. His umbrella is wider than average, with a heavy-looking tip and an unusually thick handle. Maybe he just likes good craftsmanship, or maybe he's delivering something that isn't listed on any invoice. You'll never know. That's the dance in Edo. Everyone follows the rules, until they don't. The city pulses around you. Distant bells mark the hour. A dog barks once, then quiets. You hear footsteps, then silence. Rain blurs the world into soft edges and gentle distortion. And in the hush, you realize every Vagasa around you is a story, some of them sweet, some of them sad, and some best left unopened. So walk carefully. Keep your umbrella dry and your eyes dry too, because sometimes what's hidden under that canopy isn't just a blade or a scroll. Sometimes it's intention, and those weigh more than any storm. Your steps take you deeper into the city now, where the avenues widen and the buildings rise like cedar cliffs on either side. The rain has tapered into a whisper, just enough to keep the umbrellas up. And that's lucky, because what you're about to walk into is a performance, and your Vagasa is the ticket. This, dear traveler, is the theater district. More specifically, Edo's kabuki world, where emotions are big, costumes are loud, and umbrellas, well, they're practically co-stars. Kabuki, born in the early 1600s, wasn't just theater, it was spectacle. A collision of dance, drama, and makeup so intense it could stain your dreams. But the audience didn't come just for the stories, they came for symbols. And in kabuki, the humble umbrella got promoted. It was no longer just a tool or prop, it became a visual code. You take a seat, or rather you wedge yourself into a corner where you won't block anyone's view. The crowd around you is buzzing. Someone smells like grilled eel. Another person's umbrella leaks in a rhythmic drip onto your sleeve. But no one minds. The play is about to begin. Cue the curtain. On stage, a ronin steps into view. He's clutching a black Vagasa, the edges torn, the lacquer flaking. You recognize this move. It's classic kabuki shorthand. The worn umbrella, I send tea about the rain. It's about the man, his struggles, his disgrace, his loneliness. Even if not a single drop falls on stage, that umbrella tells the entire backstory. Kabuki actors used Vagasa like an extra limb. A closed umbrella became a walking stick for the elderly. A half-open one might hint at secrets, hesitation, or betrayal. Opened fully and spun slowly, romance or a seduction laced with doom. And if an umbrella was smashed mid-performance, you could bet someone was about to die or declare vengeance. Or both, if it was a really good show. Historians still argue whether kabuki inspired umbrella etiquette or merely reflected it. Some claim every day Edoites began copying what they saw on stage, tilting umbrellas just so, mimicking their favorite tragic hero. Others argue kabuki merely dramatized the norms already alive in the streets. Either way, the influence was undeniable. Walk through Edo after a hit play and you'd see boys reenacting scenes in the mud, girls twirling paper parasols like their favorite courtesan characters. You catch sight of a side stage performer. Now he's miming a street vendor, but his umbrella is lined with red threads along the inner ribs. That's no accident. In this play, the threads signal blood ties and family tension. Sure enough, the next scene involves a tearful confrontation between brothers, one of whom was plot twist adopted. classic kabuki. But it wasn't all drama. Umbrellas were also comedic gold. The overconfident samurai who trips on a slippery stage only to use his umbrella as a landing cushion? Crowned favorite. The elderly grandmother who threatens everyone with her bagasa like it's a sword? Thunderous applause. One legendary actor known only as Tobe with a wobble made a career out of using a broken umbrella as a visual gag. Every time it turned inside out, the audience lost it. And then there were the romance scenes. Picture this. Two lovers meet secretly beneath a single umbrella. The sound of stage rain mimicked by shaken paper sheets offstage. Their faces are turned slightly away from each other, not from shame, but from yearning. One reaches out ever so slightly to touch the handle. The audience holds its breath. In kabuki, that's the equivalent of a full-blown kiss. Here's your quirky tidbit. Kabuki troupes occasionally auctioned off their stage umbrellas to wealthy fans. That's right. You could buy the very Vagasa your favorite actor held during the tragic death monologue of the snowbound widow of Aizu. Prices soared. Fans slept in line. It was a whole thing. Some umbrellas ended up enshrined in family altars. Others were dismantled and turned into fans, bookmarks, or charms. Edo fandom? Intense. But kabuki wasn't the only stage where umbrellas danced. The street performers, the yos storytellers, the traveling comedians, the acrobats often used Vagasa in their routines. A storyteller might spin an umbrella slowly as he unraveled a ghost tale, the hypnotic movement drawing the audience into the other world. A dancer might balance a lantern on top of a twirling Vagasa to wow the crowd. Even some early sumo parades featured giant umbrellas bearing the wrestler's family crest, carried like parasols of glory. Umbrellas also crept into the visual arts. Ukiyo-e prints captured famous kabuki scenes. Actors immortalized mid-pose. Umbrellas held at just the right tilt to suggest heartbreak or rage. Artists knew even a scrap of umbrella in the background could set the emotional tone of an entire print. But let's not forget the artisans behind the scenes. Kabuki didn't use off-the-rack umbrellas. These were custom jobs, larger, heavier, painted with exaggerated patterns to catch candlelight. Some were even designed to collapse theatrically, an umbrella that folds into a heart or bursts open with a stage puff to reveal a hidden message. Stage magic, Edo style. You pass by one of those old theaters now, the curtain drawn, the echoes of applause long faded. But you swear you can still hear it, the click of Geta sandals, the flutter of fans, and the soft, dramatic thunk of a Vagasa being set on the floor before a climactic monologue. It's funny, isn't it? In a society where silence and subtlety were prized, the umbrella became a tool of expression. On stage, it exaggerated. Off stage, it hinted. In kabuki, the umbrella shouted. In real life, it whispered. You keep walking, Vagasa in hand, thinking of all the performances that have played out beneath similar canopies. The quiet reunions, the loud farewells, the monologues mouthed in rainstorms no one else saw. Maybe you're part of a story right now, one with a Vagasa of your own. One where you exit stage right into the mist, your umbrella raised like a signal flare asking, daring, inviting someone to follow. You make your way past the shuttered theaters now, where the cobblestones glisten like lacquered trays in the moonlight. A few other late stragglers stroll under Vagasa, their silhouettes slipping through pools of amber lantern glow. But something shifted. You can feel it. The Vagasa are quieter now. More than rain shields or drama props, they've become part of a social ritual. In this part of town, your umbrella isn't just an object. It's a performance of manners, a code, a contract of civility. Edo, for all its fire and flair, was obsessed with Rigi social etiquette. This wasn't just about bowing angles or how loudly you slurped your noodles. It extended to every inch of your body in public, and that included what you did with your umbrella. Yes, even that dripping, slightly bent, rice paper-topped companion had rules, and you'd better follow them. Take walking, for instance. You'd think, umbrella up, eyes forward, done. But no. If you passed someone of higher social status, say, a samurai or a wealthy merchant, you were expected to lower your umbrella slightly so your face was visible. Why? Because to keep it raised was to imply superiority, or worse, anonymity. Both were seen as disrespectful. One unlucky apothecary's apprentice was once beaten with the flat of a katana for failing to lower his vagasa when crossing a bridge in front of a daimyo's entourage. The punishment? Public apology and 3 weeks of cleaning horse stables. All because he liked his umbrella's tilt a little too proud. You learn quickly in Edo, your umbrella has posture. And then there was the matter of drip discipline. Nothing screamed uncouth peasant like letting your vagasa rainwater pour onto someone else. In fact, you were expected to shake it out discreetly before entering an establishment, preferably not while standing in someone else's personal space. Shops placed small stone basins or flat bamboo mats near entrances, specifically for umbrella draining. Some even had designated umbrella boys whose only job was to gently dry and stack vagasa while customers dined or haggled. Let's not forget the indoor protocol. Once inside, vagasa had to be closed and placed in a specific orientation handle pointing inward, tip outward. This wasn't just feng shui. It was so the next person didn't stab themselves on your careless ribs. Historians still argue whether this habit developed out of practicality or superstition. Some believed an inward-facing umbrella invited bad luck or reversed fortunes. Others were more worried about slippery floors and bloodied toes. You pass a small tea house now. Outside, an orderly row of umbrellas leans like sleeping cranes, handles all turned precisely to the right. That's not coincidence, that's etiquette. Here's a quirky little trend. Edo children were taught umbrella manners using songs. One popular rhyme went, "Don't point your ribs at Uncle's face, or he'll replace your sweets with lace." No one quite knows what the lace punishment entailed, but it worked. Kids learned fast. Another popular lesson involved puppet shows where the villain always jabbed his umbrella at people and got banished to the muddy outskirts of town. Of course, there were rebels. The umbrella punks of the merchant class, yes, that's a thing, who tilted their vagasa sideways, let water run down the tips like dramatic tears, and didn't care who they splashed. They wore flashy robes and fastened their umbrellas with oversized cords dyed with crushed safflower. City patrolmen scowled at them. Grandmothers clucked their tongues. But they were cool, at least until they tripped on a slick tile and soaked their back pockets. And then there was sharing. Ah yes, the most complex of all umbrella protocols. Sharing a vagasa with someone, especially someone of the opposite sex, was a gesture thick with unspoken meaning. It wasn't like splitting a cab or lending a hoodie. It meant intimacy, trust, possibly scandal. If a samurai and a geisha were spotted under the same umbrella, rumors could fly faster than an arrow. Poets even coined a term for this. Ai-gasa, love umbrella. Entire storylines in woodblock prints and folk songs revolved around this gesture. Two people under one canopy, the space between them charged, their hands brushing on the handle. Goosebumps, gossip, occasionally marriage. More often, drama. Some young couples got clever. They'd accidentally be caught in the rain with just one umbrella. Friends would pretend to forget theirs on purpose. Umbrella sharing became an excuse to get close, whispered about in classrooms, and hinted at in diaries. Parents warned daughters, one Vagasa, two hearts leads to tea-house tears. Not exactly Shakespeare, but they meant well. Scholars still debate whether these love umbrellas were genuinely romantic or just efficient rain covering. But come on, you've seen the art. You've heard the songs. There's no denying that something stirred beneath those oiled paper canopies. You continued down the street, weaving carefully around a group of older men playing go beneath the overhang of a bathhouse. Their Vagasa lean like tired sentries against the wall. One is painted with a faded dragon. Another bears a red circle with a single kanji, patience. You nod at them, lifting your umbrella slightly in greeting. One of the men returns the gesture without looking up from the game. That right there? Umbrella fluency. Before long you reach a bridge, the kind you've seen in 100 prints, arched like a fox's back, framed by low lanterns swaying in the breeze. Two women approach from the other side, umbrellas held neatly, walking single file to avoid hogging the path. You do the same. As you pass, you both lower your Vagasa just enough to glimpse each other's eyes. Not flirtation, not challenge, just shared acknowledgement of a shared rule book. Because that's the thing about Edo sidewalk etiquette. It wasn't written, it was lived, reinforced by glances, nods, soft corrections. And rain, always rain. So the next time you're in a storm, think of this. Every Vagasa you pass might be participating in a centuries-old dance of manners. A little tilt here, a quick shake there, a silent promise that I want to splash you if you want to splash me. And if someone lowers theirs first, smile. You've just been greeted by the invisible hand of Edo courtesy. The bridge behind you hums with old etiquette. And as you move deeper into Edo's sleeping belly, the streets begin to thin. The lanterns dim. But even here, in the quieter alleys and tucked-away corners, your umbrella still plays a part. Because now we're recrossing from the main roads of daily life into the shadowy lanes of regulation, where umbrellas weren't just aesthetic, or expressive, or even just polite. They were the subject of law. Yes, you heard that right. The Tokugawa shogunate, the iron-fisted rulers of Edo, Japan, cared deeply about what you did with your umbrella, enough to write it into ordinances, fines, and policing manuals. You might have thought the umbrella was just a paper and bamboo cloud shield, but in the eyes of Edo's bureaucrats, it was a potential menace, a dripping, poking, disrespectful hazard that needed regulation. Let's start with materials. You couldn't just whip together any old thing and call it a Vagasa. There were strict guilds that governed the manufacture of umbrellas, and even stricter rules about how much lacquer could be used. Why? Because lacquer was flammable, and Edo was a city built almost entirely of wood. One spark from a lantern onto an over-lacquered umbrella drying in the sun, and poof, you've got a firestorm on your hands. Which incidentally did happen more than once. Entire neighborhoods went up in flames, all traced back to careless umbrella storage. So enter regulation. Umbrella makers were required to stamp their seals onto finished products, like little paper passports of responsibility. If your umbrella was traced back to a fire incident, your workshop could be shut down, and you'd be publicly humiliated, sometimes forced to kneel at intersections with a placard listing your offense. Careless lacquer artisan, caused 5-house blaze. But the law didn't stop at how umbrellas were made. Oh no, it went all the way to how you used them. City edicts declared specific zones where umbrellas were not allowed to be opened, even in the rain. Covered market streets? Keep it closed, your umbrella was too likely to knock over goods or poke someone's eye out. Temple courtyards? Forbidden, unless you were part of an official procession. One particularly grumpy monk in Asakusa was notorious for chasing umbrella carriers away with a broom, muttering about spiritual clarity and dripping distractions. Even the height at which you held your vagasa was policed in crowded districts. If it was too low, you were obscuring your identity suspicious. Too high, and you risked clashing spokes with passing umbrellas, which could escalate into actual sidewalk brawls. No joke. One city patrol record from 1784 details a ribs crossing incident that resulted in 3 broken noses and the complete destruction of a sweet potato vendor's cart. Naturally, the authorities stepped in. Samurai guards issued on-the-spot scoldings. Offenders might be fined a few mon coins, or worse, have their umbrella confiscated. Imagine the shame of walking home soaked, holding only the soggy handle of your poor outlawed vagasa. Instant social demotion. And then there was the matter of decorum enforcement. Umbrellas with inappropriate decorations, risk art, political slogans, or erotic poems, yes, that was a trend, were banned outright. Police squads known as Makikata Bugyushu did seasonal sweeps, confiscating vagasa, deemed corrupting to public order. Some vagasa smugglers got clever, hiding naughty verses between the paper layers or painting them in ink that only appeared when the umbrella got wet. Edo teens were nothing if not creative. Historians still argue whether these rules were genuinely effective or mostly symbolic. Did they actually reduce injuries and fires? Or were they just a way for the shogunate to flex control over daily minutiae? Some scholars point to repeated umbrella edicts as evidence the rules weren't working. If people followed them, why keep reissuing them every few years? But in a city that pulsed with over 1 million residents, where one ill-timed umbrella poke could spark a duel or derail a procession, it's easy to see why the shogunate took no chances. Here is your quirky tidbit. Some neighborhoods developed informal umbrella marshals, usually retired samurai or nosy grandfathers who patrol alleyways, correcting people's vagasa posture and issuing stern lectures. Not official lawmen, but respected enough that folks listened. They even wore sashes just to make it extra dramatic. You pass one of those alleyways now. It's empty, but you can almost hear the echo of a stern old man growling. Left hand only on Tuesdays, boy, as he adjusts someone's grip like a sword master. Were they overzealous? Probably. But Edo had a soft spot for rule keepers. In fact, umbrella compliance was so ingrained that certain classes had extra privileges. Daimyo processions, for instance, could carry special umbrellas larger, emblazoned with family crests, and held by attendants rather than the nobleman himself. These umbrellas acted like mobile walls, announcing importance and shielding the highborn from sun and rain alike. Blocking one with your own umbrella, even accidentally, was a serious offense. Depending on the daimyo's mood, you might lose more than your vagasa. Yet not all umbrella infractions were punished. Some were publicly mocked. Satirical woodblock prints flourished in the late 1700s, showing exaggerated umbrella mishaps, slippery nobles sliding into puddles, lovers caught mid-argument under a snapped rib, or merchants so obsessed with umbrella posture they missed thieves robbing them blind. It was Edo's version of slapstick. Umbrella comedy was real, folks. And amid all this seriousness and silliness, there emerged a culture of intentional compliance. People didn't just follow umbrella laws, they began to take pride in them. Umbrella schools popped up. Yes, you heard that right, schools, where apprentices learned the right way to carry, open and close a vagasa with poise. Samurai learned how to sheath and unsheath their umbrellas like swords. Courtesans practiced dramatic umbrella lift to punctuate greetings. You arrive at a quiet square now. In its center, a weather-worn statue stands, a merchant holding a vagasa, his other hand raised mid-explanation. Local legend claims he was a scholar of umbrella law, wrote essays about Vagasa protocol, dreamed of a code that would unify all sidewalk traffic. He died tripping over a dog. But hey, he tried. So next time you twirl your umbrella idly in a drizzle, imagine someone in Edo getting cuffed for the same thing, or lectured by a neighborhood vigilante, or celebrated in an ukiyo-e parody. The Vagasa wasn't just for weather, it was for order, and sometimes for chaos. You stand now at the edge of a district where daylight never quite leaves. The theater signs still glow faintly, even after hours, and the scent of roasted chestnuts lingers like a secret. This is where performance rules the day, and the umbrella, once again, finds itself center stage. Literally, because here in the buzzing world of Edo's theater culture, the humble Vagasa wasn't just a prop, it was a scene stealer. You duck under an archway into a narrow lane, and you're practically surrounded by the ghosts of kabuki actors in flamboyant robes, powdered faces, and booming voices echoing through memory. Kabuki, after all, was born in Edo, and from its earliest days, umbrellas were not just accessories, but expressive extensions of the character. Love, rage, deception, elegance, they could all be portrayed with the flick or flutter of a well-timed Vagasa. Take a moment and imagine it. The stage is dim. A lone actor strides in, Vagasa angled against the light, obscuring half his painted face. The crowd hushes. Is he hiding sorrow? Plotting revenge? Flirting? One slow tilt of the umbrella, and the story shifts completely. You don't even need dialogue. That's the power of the prop. Kabuki manuals from the late 18th century actually include umbrella, choreography-specific angles and movements meant to signal different emotions. A sudden collapse of the Vagasa? Despair. A rapid spin before tucking it under the arm? Arrogance. A pause followed by a slow opening under moonlight? Romantic tension so thick you could slice it with a fan. One performer, Ichikawa Danjiro V, was so famous for his umbrella work that fans would mimic his Vagasa handling in the streets. He made the backward flick, a dramatic snap, to open the umbrella behind the back, a signature move. Legend says he practiced it over 1,000 times before ever performing it on stage. Now that's commitment to the bit. But theater etiquette around umbrellas wasn't limited to actors. Audiences, too, had rules. Outdoor kabuki venues, especially the makeshift riverside stages during festival season, had strict viewing guidelines. Vagasa had to be tilted low behind you or left at the entrance. No one wanted to miss a death monologue because of someone's oversized dragon-patterned canopy blocking the view. That said, people still got creative. Some fans commissioned miniature Vagasa, just big enough to keep the sun off their noses, but not tall enough to obscure the stage. Others layered transparent oiled paper over their Vagasa so neighbors could see through them. Imagine modern theater-goers wearing periscope hats. It's about that level of commitment. And for theater-goers with money, there were reserved box seats that came with personal umbrella holders, teen boys who'd crouch next to you, quietly adjusting the angle for optimal shade without interrupting the drama. Historians still argue whether this was genuinely helpful or just Edo's version of over-the-top status signaling. Spoiler, probably both. Of course, the Vagasa's role in theater extended beyond kabuki. In bunraku, Japan's traditional puppet theater, miniature umbrellas were used to signal weather or mood. When the puppeteers manipulated the Vagasa just right, the audience would audibly gasp. There is even a record of a bunraku scene being stopped mid-performance because the puppet as umbrella was accidentally tilted left-handed, huge taboo suggesting the character was impure or mad. The audience demanded a redo. The puppeteers complied. Umbrella politics, people. It was real. Here's a quirk you'll enjoy. Some Vagasa props were designed to accidentally break on stage, timed perfectly with an emotional climax. Picture this: our tragic heroine, rejected and weeping, opens her umbrella in the rain, and the ribs collapse. A single gust of wind takes the shredded paper. Cue sobbing. The crowd loses it. Drama gold. Umbrella symbolism in Edo theater got so dense that scholars later published entire glossaries. A Vagasa painted with birds? Hope, with red maple leaves. Regret, with cracked lacquer along one spoke. Broken promises. These weren't just design choices, they were semiotic landmines, and actors learned to read them as fluently as their lines. You pass a closed tea house now, once used by backstage staff and playwrights. Rumor has it a now-lost play titled The Umbrella of Vengeance was written here, a melodrama involving a samurai who carves revenge poetry into the ribs of his umbrella before assassinating his betrayer in the snow. Sounds a bit dramatic? Absolutely. Edo loved it. In fact, Vagasa became so popular in theater merch that stalls outside venues sold replica umbrellas, complete with character names painted on the handles. It was like buying a lightsaber at Comic-Con, if your lightsaber also doubled as a rain shield and status flex. Naturally, not everyone loved the obsession. Some critics complained that kabuki was becoming too Vagasa-focused, arguing that actors relied more on props than actual skill. One sour essayist in 1812 described modern kabuki as a rainstorm of lazy poses hiding under umbrellas too big for their meaning. Harsh, but also kind of poetic. Still, for the fans, the Vagasa was part of the magic. You weren't just watching a play, you were watching weather, mood, politics, heartbreak, and joy, all filtered through that circular canopy of oiled paper. That's why actors treated their Vagasa like sacred instruments. They were stored in padded crates, cleaned with brushes made from horsehair, carried by trusted assistants, never tossed or leaned carelessly. Here's something else. Performers often had personalized Vagasa made to mirror their character arc. One might start the play with a bright crimson canopy, then swap it secretly for a faded gray one after a betrayal. The audience would catch it. They always did. Edo audiences were sharp, and Vagasa design was part of the emotional subtext they came for. You reach the end of the theater quarter, and the silence here feels charged like the moment just before the curtain rises. In the distance, a paper lantern swings lazily, its tassels brushing a closed umbrella leaning against the wall. And you realize something. In Edo's theaters, umbrellas weren't just tools. They were emotion. They were narrative. They were characters in their own right. So next time you step into a rainy day, remember you're not just carrying a weather device. You're holding centuries of theatrical tradition. And who knows, with the right spin, you just might be ready for your own spotlight. You keep walking, and the air changes. The playful buzz of theater fades behind you, replaced by something quieter, denser. You're entering a part of Edo where nothing is loud but everything matters. This is the realm of rituals, where religion, ceremony, and seasonal observance dictate the rhythm of life. And yes, even here, the umbrella has its sacred roles to play. You pass a shrine gate, its wooden pillars worn smooth by centuries of fingertips. Crows murmur overhead, and incense curls from an unseen altar. In places like this, umbrellas aren't tools of convenience. They're symbolic veils. Protection not just from the elements, but from impurity, from spiritual exposure, from the gaze of the divine. The first thing you notice is how differently umbrellas are treated here. They're no longer carried over the head, but held at an angle, like a respectful bow. And it's not just you doing the bowing, it's the Vagasa itself, lowered as a gesture of humility. That quiet little tilt, it's practically a prayer. Umbrellas were often used in religious processions, not to shield participants from weather, but to elevate the moment. Priests walking between temples carried black or purple Vagasa as signs of solemnity. High-ranking monks or imperial envoys used umbrellas with gold-threaded spokes, their canopies sewn with sacred motifs like lotus blossoms or cranes. You could track someone's spiritual clout by their umbrella alone. Humble rice priest, plain brown paper. High-ranking abbot with connections to Kyoto, his Vagasa shimmered. During the Jian Matsuri or the Kanda festival, entire squads of umbrella bearers paraded through the streets, twirling their Vagasa in choreographed spirals that mimicked wind and water. It wasn't just pageantry, it was purification through movement. Imagine a sea of spinning umbrellas reflecting lantern light, like a storm made of oil paper stars. The effect was mesmerizing, almost trance-like, a city-wide meditation disguised as celebration. But umbrellas and ritual weren't just for the visible and public. They also played a role in the quiet rituals of daily devotion. In household Shinto altars, miniature Vagasa were sometimes placed beside offerings of sake and salt, symbolizing protection for wandering spirits. During Oben, when ancestral ghosts returned to visit, families in some neighborhoods would prop a child's umbrella near the doorway, open, and facing out an invitation, a shelter, a welcome sign for the dearly departed. You pass one such doorway now. The umbrella's long gone, of course, but the stone base where it once stood remains, chipped and mossy. Someone tucked a fresh camellia there just this morning. Here's a delightful fringe detail for you. In a few rural areas, people believed umbrellas could trap malevolent spirits, like literal ghost nets. If your house felt off strange sounds, sudden chills, you'd open an old Vagasa in the attic and leave it there overnight. If it collapsed by morning, it meant something had been caught. Then you'd burn it. Umbrella exorcism. Practical and spooky. Historians still argue whether such practices were genuinely widespread or more isolated to local folk traditions. Edo wasn't a monolith after all. What was sacred in one neighborhood might be seen as silly 2 bridges over. Still, even the most skeptical record keepers mentioned these rituals, often with a shrugging note like, "The old women insist on it." More formalized rituals placed umbrellas at the center of symbolic transitions. In marriage ceremonies, for instance, a red umbrella was often used to shelter the bride as she moved from her family home to her husband. Not just to block sun or rain, but to conceal her face from jealous spirits who might follow and curse the union. That Vagasa was often kept afterward, hung above the family altar, its paper never to be replaced, a reminder of that vulnerable crossing from one life into another. You also had funerary umbrellas, pale gray or white, often undecorated. One was carried at the head of the procession, leading the deceased through their final walk. Some say the Vagasa was meant to shield the soul from forgetting its path. Others believed it helped confuse vengeful ghosts. Don't follow me, follow the umbrella. Classic Edo misdirection. In certain death rites, the umbrella would be burned at the gravesite, along with a lock of hair, and a paper doll symbolically destroying the things that tied the spirit to this world. Some mourners kept a small sliver of the Vagasa's charred bamboo as a keepsake tucked into their obi as a way of remembering, a tender, quiet mourning. Here is a fringe tidbit. Monks at a certain Zen temple in North Edo used broken umbrella ribs as part of their calligraphy training. They'd shave the bamboo into slender brushes and use them to copy sutras by candlelight, the imperfect strokes seen as reflections of spiritual imperfection. A straight line made crooked, one teacher was fond of saying, is the beginning of insight. And let's not forget the changing seasons. Umbrella rituals marked the shift from summer to fall, especially during Suyu, the rainy season. Temples would host umbrella blessing ceremonies, where people brought their vagasa to be sprinkled with sacred water and chanted over for good fortune. Some even dipped their umbrellas into temple ponds, letting the droplets dry naturally as a kind of protective charm. It was less about superstition and more about community, like saying, yes, we're all in this soggy mess together. You pass a shrine stall now, where merchants once sold rain tokens, small charms shaped like folded umbrellas, carved from shell or lacquered wood. People tied them to their actual umbrellas for luck or wore them on cords around the neck. Edo was a city that believed even a storm cloud could be tamed with the right token. But for all their symbolism and softness, umbrellas could also be rejected in ritual. There's one notable case of a monk who refused to walk under any vagasa, believing it blocked his connection to the heavens. He'd rather be drenched than spiritually disconnected. His students followed suit. It became a kind of ascetic fashion trend for about 3 weeks, until someone caught pneumonia, and they all went back to umbrellas with sheepish apologies. Even sacred habits have their limits. You slow your step now, and for a moment, everything is still. The rituals of Edo were never just for the gods. They were for the people trying to make sense of the rain. The umbrellas they held weren't just covers. They were metaphors for passage, for boundaries, for quiet protection. And in a city as densely layered as Edo, that metaphor carried weight. Whether shielding a newborn from wind, a corpse from wandering, or a bride from jealous spirits, the vagasa was always more than it seemed. It was a gesture of grace in a world that never stopped moving. You follow the curve of a cobbled alley, where dew gathers on the paper shoshi windows, and the air smells faintly of miso soup and damp wood. Morning hasn't quite arrived, but the city is beginning to breathe again. Street vendors stretch behind their stalls. Shopkeepers rattle open sliding doors. And right here, where religion gives way to routine, the umbrella settles into its final, everyday rhythm, the commerce of it all. Welcome to the umbrella economy of Edo, an entire miniature industry spun around one folding canopy. You turn into what used to be the craftsman quarter. The sound of lacquer brushing paper, the rhythmic snip of shears cutting bamboo, this was once the soundtrack of 1,000 tiny shops working in concert. Vagasa weren't imported from far-off factories. No, they were made right here, one by one, each a product of a microcosm of Edo's bustling trades. First came the takazai-ku-shi, the bamboo workers. They split and carved the ribs, slicing them into delicate slivers that could bend without snapping. Each umbrella required around 30 to 40 ribs, more if it was for ceremonial use. The best bamboo came from kaishu, harvested only in winter when the stalks were firm and sapless. Next came the paper makers, washishi, whose craft was nothing short of magical. The handmade paper had to be strong but breathable, thin but light capturing. Many workshops used mulberry pulp, and some even infused the paper with camellia oil for waterproofing and scent. There is a record of one artisan flavoring his vagasa paper with a mild plum aroma he claimed soothed headaches during summer storms. Historians still argue whether that was good marketing or placebo genius. Probably both. Then you had the frame assemblers who created the umbrella's skeleton. But the most dramatic job? The umbrella opener's apprentices trained to snap each new umbrella open just once, at the exact right moment, with the exact right pressure. The first open was sacred. If it cracked, start over. Some superstitious shops wouldn't sell a vagasa unless its first open was done under moonlight. Let it bloom in silence, they'd say, as if it were a flower. Of course, Edo didn't stop at just making umbrellas. It also sold, rented, recycled, and yes, even repaired them. Umbrella repair was a booming side business. Small street stalls, often just a tarp, a stool, and a cheerful uncle with bad eyesight would offer quick mends for torn paper or bent spokes. Kids would run errands for their parents. Go fix Auntie's umbrella, and don't let him upcharge you. And umbrella rentals? Oh, they were huge, especially near bridges and temple districts, where sudden storms could strand pilgrims and tourists. For the equivalent of a bowl of rice, you could borrow a vagasa for the day. Some stalls required a deposit, usually in the form of a sandal, which they'd hang on a hook as collateral. You want your shoe back? Bring the umbrella back. Simple, effective, slightly humiliating. One particularly entrepreneurial stall near Nihonbashi became famous for engraving numbers into rental vagasa. Customers could return them to any participating shop citywide. It was Edo's version of a bike share program, forward-thinking and surprisingly well-organized for an era without spreadsheets. And speaking of branding, yes, Edo had designer umbrellas. Well, sort of. Elite umbrella makers stamped their paper with subtle ink marks, floral crests, poetry snippets, sometimes even caricatures of rival shops. Some customers developed fierce loyalties. I only use Tsuruya umbrellas, someone might brag, as if that was shorthand for having taste and rainy day wisdom. One daimyo supposedly sent servants to Edo once a year just to collect 30 vagasa from his preferred maker. Excessive? Sure, but this was a time when appearances dripped with social meaning, quite literally, during Tsuyu season. Then there were seasonal umbrellas. Summer vagasa had extra oiled coating and lighter frames. Autumn versions sometimes featured rust-colored patterns. Some merchants made miniature New Year's vagasa meant to sit on home altars, printed with fortunes like "You will forget your debts during rainstorms," or "Romance is likely at the next drizzle." Sounds like a horoscope written by someone in marketing, which, let's face it, it probably was. And let's not forget children's umbrellas. These were smaller, often brightly painted with animal motifs, koi fish, cranes, kittens, mid-pounce. The quirk? Many were intentionally made with a single spoke slightly misaligned. Parents believed it would teach kids to walk with awareness, adjusting their angle to keep dry. Think of it as early Edo balance training, or how to gracefully dodge puddles while contemplating one's place in the universe. Now, not all umbrella commerce was legal or polite. There was a shady side. Counterfeit vagasa flooded the market during festival season, cheaply made, prone to collapse, and often painted with stolen designs. One infamous vendor near Asakusa Temple became known as Two-Rain Tanaka because his umbrellas barely survived 2 uses. Authorities once raided his stall and found dozens of fake umbrellas stuffed with gambling slips. So yes, illegal lotteries inside umbrellas. Edo folks were creative criminals. There is even one bizarre tale, take it with a pinch of ceremonial salt, about a love triangle between a samurai, a tea-house girl, and an umbrella seller. Supposedly, the seller wrote secret love letters on the underside of the vagasa canopy. When opened in the rain, the ink would blur and reveal the message. Romantic? Creepy? Probably both. It ended with the samurai stealing all 200 of the umbrellas and throwing them into the Sumida River in a jealous rage. The girl married a tofu merchant, as one does. You pass a quiet courtyard now where old umbrella molds lie stacked like sleeping skeletons. The commerce may have faded, but its echoes still flutter. Every folded vagasa held the touch of a dozen artisans. Every opened one was a tiny explosion of human effort, pride, and maybe just a little superstition. The umbrella in Edo wasn't just something you used. It was something you trusted, bought carefully, repaired fondly, lost reluctantly. And every vagasa that passed through the hands of a street vendor, a noblewoman, or a stage actor carried with it an entire economy small, humming and vital to the pulse of the city. So next time you're handed a mass-produced, factory-made umbrella that flips inside out at the first breeze, just imagine what it meant to carry one made by a master, oiled by hand, and opened only once under the moon with reverence. You slip back onto the main road as night begins to settle again. The lanterns are already swinging from wooden beams, their paper skins glowing warm amber. Shadows stretch long and slow, as if even the buildings are starting to yawn. But don't close your eyes just yet. We re-stepping into the final realm of Edo's umbrella story. How it all began to fade. Change doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, like fog rolling over a familiar path. And in the case of the Vagasa, the end didn't come from a fire or flood, but from something as innocent as convenience. At first, things seemed stable. The city's rhythm stayed intact even as the 19th century rolled toward its midpoint. But cracks began to show around the time Commodore Perry, as black ships appeared off the coast in 1853. You remember that moment from school? Probably. Big foreign boats, loud cannons, uncomfortable diplomacy. Edo opened to the outside world. Western goods began to flood in like an unexpected downpour. And with those goods came a new kind of umbrella, collapsible, fabric-covered, metal-ribbed, and undeniably modern. They looked like insects, sleek, narrow, all angles. No lacquer, no poetry, just function. Imported from England, these umbrellas were originally status symbols. Early adopters were laughed at. "You look like a bat with a stick," one Vagasa maker reportedly said. But bats fly, and soon so did Western umbrellas. Historians still argue whether Vagasa makers resisted this change out of pride or necessity. Some say they clung too tightly to tradition, unwilling to adapt. Others believe they simply couldn't afford the materials or the machines. Either way, shops began to close. Workshops fell quiet. Younger apprentices drifted to other trades, silk weaving, paper making, theater, props. All safer bets in a modernizing world. By the time of the Meiji Restoration in 1868, Edo was no longer Edo. It had become Tokyo. The shogunate was gone. Samurai had lost their stipends, and with them disappeared the structured rituals that had once elevated umbrellas into sacred objects. No more bridal Vagasa processions. Fewer temple blessings. The city was moving fast, now too fast for oil-dried paper and handcrafted ribs. One quirky detail. There was a brief period in the 1870s when some Vagasa makers tried to hybridize. They crafted umbrellas with Western frames but traditional paper coverings. The result? An umbrella that neither handled storms well nor folded properly. Critics called them confused turtles. The public, sadly, agreed. There's even a record of a single Vagasa shop that converted to selling umbrella nostalgia. Instead of new umbrellas, they sold miniatures, bookmarks, and shadow puppets shaped like old-style Vagasa. They leaned into the kitsch. Some historians debate whether this was an act of surrender or quiet rebellion, a refusal to be erased completely. But just because the Vagasa disappeared from the mainstream doesn't mean it vanished from memory. In fact, as Tokyo barreled forward, pockets of resistance emerged: small temples, aging geisha houses, rural inns, places where the umbrella held on, stubborn and soft-spoken. You visit one now. A tea house tucked between alleys, barely wide enough to stand in. An old woman bows from behind a Norn curtain. Her hands shake, but she still oils the paper of a ceremonial vagasa every month. Not for use, just because it matters. She says it's good luck, or maybe she just likes the smell of camellia oil on rainy days. Elsewhere you spot young artists sketching vagasa on postcards. Umbrella dances return to niche festivals. Costume designers bring them back for period dramas. And tourists, oh yes tourists, love them. They buy vagasa by the dozen in Kyoto, posing under them in rented kimono, like Edo ghosts given a weekend pass. Modern vagasa artisans exist too. You see them in quiet studios, hunched over ribs and paper, muttering about balance and grain and weight. It takes days to make one, weeks even, but they do it anyway. Some blend tradition with experimentation, adding modern dyes, synthetic oils, recycled bamboo. A few even embed LED lights in the spokes. Not very Edo, but clever. Time, after all, marches on. Of course, not all stories of vagasa revival are sweet. There's commercial pressure now demands for cheap versions to sell in souvenir shops. Some vagasa are made in factories abroad, then passed off as authentic. The artisans shake their heads but keep working. The rhythm is slower now, but no less meaningful. And here's a curious thing. In Tokyo today, there are still etiquette rules about umbrellas, many of which echo old Edo norms. Don't swing it while walking. Don't open it indoors. Don't set it down wet in public places. These rules linger, whispered through generations like bedtime mantras. You don't even know where you learned them, but you follow them. That's how culture works. Not by shouting, but by soaking into the grain of daily life like rain on oiled paper. So the vagasa may have stepped back from center stage, but it didn't vanish. Like so many things from Edo, it went underground, folded itself neatly, quietly, into the corners of modern memory, waiting. Sometimes during a summer storm in Tokyo, a single red vagasa will appear on the street. No one will speak to the person holding it, but heads will turn. Because in that quiet flash of lacquer and paper, something ancient returns. A city remembers itself, and you feel it too. Even here, even now. The sky above you is gray again, but this time it feels less threatening, just the slow, whispery kind of rain that doesn't really fall, so much as hang in the air like breath on a winter morning. You're back where we started, on the winding streets of Edo that once pulsed with 1,000 careful rhythms. Except now there's just you, the soft hiss of drizzle on rooftops, and the ghost of a paper umbrella swaying gently in someone's memory. This last chapter of the journey isn't about rules or tools or trades. It is about what is left behind when the umbrellas close for good, how the vagasa lives on in behavior, posture, and instinct. The etiquette of it all echoing far past the last lacquered handle. You pass a schoolyard. Children are walking home in a line, umbrellas up like mushrooms, and not one of them pokes another in the eye. A miracle? Not really. The old rules remain. Walk with your umbrella angled slightly out. Don't swing it when excited. Always close it carefully before entering a shop, and shake it gently away from others. You never really had to learn this. Somehow it was absorbed like manners from your grandmother or the right way to butter toast. Historians still argue whether these social codes were formally written down in the Edo period or simply modeled by example. Probably both. The samurai had written etiquette scrolls, rigi saho, that included umbrella decorum, but much of the sidewalk behavior came from ordinary people observing each other. A kind of civic osmosis. You see someone gracefully close a dripping umbrella before entering a tea shop, and you copy it. Multiply that by 10,000 mornings and evenings, and you get a culture. In fact, Edo may have had the most polite rainstorms in world history. Crowded sidewalks, narrow streets, everyone holding sharp objects above their heads, and yet somehow, no duels, no umbrella jousts, no lawsuits, just coordinated choreography. It's like watching a flock of birds shift direction mid-flight, except the birds are merchants, monks, and mothers. Of course, not every rule stuck around. No one today insists that your umbrella must match your rank or season. No one slaps fines on you for resting a wet umbrella against the wrong shrine wall. But even now, there's a soft social penalty for behaving badly with one. Try snapping yours open too fast on a packed train platform. You'll feel it, the unspoken scorn of the public, the ancestors shaking their heads. Shame delivered silently, Edo style. You spot an old shop along the edge of the neighborhood, its entrance shaded by a heavy Noren curtain. Inside, a dozen vagasa hang from the ceiling like jellyfish. The owner looks up, nods, and returns to brushing lacquer onto a bamboo rib. No rush. No signs, just rain and routine. He tells you with a shrug that he sells maybe one umbrella a week, but people still come, sometimes just to watch. You're reminded of a curious footnote in umbrella lore. There used to be a form of performance art in late Edo, where actors mined etiquette failures for comedic effect, spinning umbrellas in the street, whacking noblemen by accident, entering shrines with dripping paper canopies. The audience howled, because even back then, everyone knew the rules well enough to laugh when they were broken. Comedy only works when the frame is familiar. Even haiku poets got in on the etiquette game. There's one poem from the 1820s that reads, "In silent drizzle, the monk steps aside to pass. Umbrella bows too, a bowing umbrella." A gesture so ingrained that even your tools learn to be polite. That's the legacy of Edo. And then there's the quiet rebellion, the soft ways in which people tested the limits. Artists painted forbidden symbols on the underside of vagasa canopies. Young lovers met under oversized umbrellas so they could whisper without being heard. Vendors modified vagasa handles to include secret compartments, coins, love notes, snacks. Historians discovered one example with a tiny folding fan inside. Function meets fashion. Cheeky meets chic. You stroll past a festival ground. It's quiet now, but you imagine the paper lanterns blazing, the sound of wooden geta clapping against the path. Picture a dancer spinning with a vagasa paper fluttering, lacquer glinting, and every twirl a nod to a century of sidewalk rules. Not because someone made her follow them, but because it still feels good to do things gracefully. You turn a final corner, and the rain lets up. The sky shifts to a soft blue-gray. The world feels rinsed, clean, waiting. You close your umbrella slowly, deliberately, just as someone in Edo would have done centuries ago. No one watches, but still, you do it right. Because even when it's gone, etiquette lingers. And the vagasa? It was never just about the rain. It was about movement, presence, posture. About how to exist in shared space without colliding. A tool that taught grace. A canopy that held community. You step under a low awning and rest a moment, listening to the last drops slide off the rooftops. The echoes of Edo remain, not in textbooks or museums, but in the quiet choreography of how people carry themselves when the skies open up. And now, at last, it's time to fold this story closed. Winged down 300 words. So as the final drops fall and the quiet deepens, you let your shoulders soften. No more bustling vendors or lacquered ribs, just stillness, just a gentle hush that follows a long, well-traveled walk through time. You've wandered cobbled streets in paper slippers, traced fingertips along the grain of bamboo, and watched rain slip down the curve of a handmade canopy. Let the Vagasa linger in your thoughts like a closing fan folded, but not forgotten. Imagine the scent of old oil and fresh rain, the soft creak of wood underfoot. Somewhere in a room lit by lantern glow, someone oils an umbrella for no reason other than love of the act. That person could be you, or someone you pass today without noticing. Let that image stay with you now as your breathing slows. In a world of noise and rush and plastic umbrellas that turn inside out on the freeway, remember Edo. Remember the grace of moving through space without jostling. The beauty of rules followed not out of fear, but because they made the world a little softer. You don't need to walk Edo's streets to honor them. Just carry yourself like someone who knows how to fold a Vagasa without snapping a single rib. You're dry now, safe, at ease. Let the sound of distant drizzle become white noise. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the umbrella close. And let yourself drift